So hello everyone, and welcome to our session today, which marks the launch of our State of the RPA Developer Survey, which is done by UiPath for the third year in a row in 2022. Today, this session is State of the RPA Developer Industry Panel. We have gathered a very nice lineup for you in order to gain insights from RPA management, agile recruitment, training, enablement, for the current RPA developers environment. So these insights are to help to our whole community of RPA developers. And now to our industry panel and our guest speakers today, which are a bunch from our partners and also from our very own community team. We have Corina, which is the Director of Marketing Community with UiPath, Melanie Forster, which is the Senior Global HR Manager for LaValle, LaValle, which is the co-CEO for Wonderbots, and Dillan Hackett, which is the Head of Training and Enablement with Tequila Automation. And this being said, I'm going to place it for Corina now to start the session as our host for today. And please remember to ask your questions in the chat, and I will be there to support you for the entire meeting.
Hello, hello, and thank you. So first, I'm sharing my full screen, right? Right. Cool. Hi, everyone. Let me take you to this one. So I will take you a bit through what we learned in the last year. And then I'm super curious to see what the experts from different angles, what they see as trends, as things that happen right now in the RPA space. Before we jump into that, let's get educated a bit on the state of the RPA developer. What's with this report? So for us, it's an extended global survey that we run in the UiPath community in partnership with a specialized research organization. So it's not just us sending a survey. There was a lot of mind put there. The objective is to better understand the job market dynamics, profiles, trends of RPA developer professions. So that means that we really look into the profile of the RPA developer, solution architect, RPA engineer. So we try to keep it as much as possible around the role of the developer, not necessarily on the extended like citizen developers or other specialists. So we can talk about that, but this one is quite a lot about the RPA developer. We collect expanded information across the entire automation space. So that means that if you have a colleague, a friend who is an RPA developer, but not necessarily with UiPath, we welcome their answers as well. So we try to understand and get a robust understanding of the entire market, not necessarily specific to UiPath. Once we will collect the answers, we will also share it with everyone. So it's not just for us, it's not going to be a secret that we own, it's with all of you. So please make sure you check the survey, you complete it, and you amplify it with your colleagues and friends. Now, from last year, so because right now we have enough answers to say stuff, but not enough, maybe we'll alterate some answers. So I will share a bit on the things that we learned and we saw in the market in the last year, and also we can still see them, but then I will let the experts to take us through more. So last year we learned the following. The main majority of the respondents are RPA developers in-house. So they automate for their colleagues, they are not at a partner working for different clients. So this is what we got to learn last year, 58% of them being in such a role. The companies, so the industries where they automate most, finance and banking, tech, software development, insurance, HR, healthcare. So these are the spaces where you will find quite many of the RPA developers. Doesn't mean that in the others we don't, but these are the most often into automation. The dimension of the RPA team and the organizations where they work. So this is quite nice to see that companies with more than 1,000 employees, so large companies, they are the ones who get into automation quite fast. They want their people to start automating, building their digital automation strategies and so on. And an interesting data that we see here is because we asked people how many people in your organization have a role in RPA. And the answers, as you can see here, people can start with teams, small teams, 1 to 5 teams dedicated to RPA. But then, if you can see in this graphic, the numbers scale quite a lot and quite fast. So there is no transition. You go directly for the 50 plus people. So on this one, I believe we'll hear some interesting insights. So why this? Something else that we know about the RPA developer, the main majority, millennials, they are in their 20s, in their 30s, so doing most of the automation. 65 of them not in their first job. So they had previous roles, and the most common roles, software developers or business analysts. So these two we saw the most common. Something really interesting again, they got the job based on internal transfers from friends, and the third category was considered LinkedIn and recruiters. So this is interesting, and we'll see this year what will bring. The programming languages that they usually know, SQL, Visual Basic, .NET, C#, Python. So these are the top ones. And the technologies that they usually work with, SQL Server, SAP, Jira, and so on. Many technologies because they are needed in their role. The RPA developers impact. Here, all the percentages look really good. So respondents feel that they are very satisfied with their work. They have high influence in the decision-making process of the technologies to use. They believe in the positive impact of RPA in society, and they also feel valued at work. I did not add here, but I can mention that they see themselves in RPA for the long run. So for 5 years from now on, they see that the role that they have right now will influence a better job that they will get in the future. So quite many positives on this. These are just some of the insights. So each year, once we finish with the report, we make sure we prepare an extended playbook about the insights that will be shared with all of you. But that will happen somewhere in June, because we are still in the collection phase and processing phase of the results. So with that, I now want to take it further to our group here and to start talking and seeing different angles of, okay, what's with the data and what do you really see in the market? And I just want to start, and Melanie, I would like to start with you if you want. So what do you really see in the market? Like, what does demand for RPA looks like? Which are the most in demand roles?
Yes, so we've seen that in the past, we really had more developers that came from very diverse backgrounds, that had maybe some IT experience, but were mostly interested in the business process itself. And today we see a change that hyper-automation is taking over, and we're looking for a lot more technical profiles right now, no? Because the processes we automate are becoming more complex. It's more about end-to-end process automation. So we're going away a little bit from just doing little projects, but to very much more complex structures. And we see that in a change that we're looking for different profiles now, a lot more technical.
So just to detail a bit, like more senior roles, does that seniority comes from RPA, or they can come from other backgrounds?
They can still come from other backgrounds. It's very helpful if they've seen other industries as well, if they already know different kinds of processes, but it's the technical background has become a lot more important. So before we had issues sometimes, like people that were very focused on IT, that after a while it wasn't that challenging for them anymore, and that's changing a lot now with hyper automation, that we can be interesting for a bigger variety of different candidates.
Cool. Steve, Dillan, what do you see from your roles. I think your roles are a bit different than Melanie's role, but what do you see in the job market?
I can jump. Excuse me, Dillan. I'll jump in first, and if you don't mind, then so Melanie, we see a lot of the same things as you're talking about. Obviously, the move away from pure RPA into a full hyper automation stack, where you're kind of adding in the IDP and the AI and the NLP and all the other alphabet soup of acronyms. There is a very strong trend in the market right now. We continue to see it expand, which is cost is awesome, because every time you add a new technology, you get to increase the number of use cases that can be automated, which leads for bigger and more interesting projects for people. So it's a very virtuous cycle of growth. I would agree and add that technical or not, if you have a programming mindset, that's kind of what we're looking for, because as you move away from task into end-to-end processes, you need to be structuring the how you're thinking about how you're designing and how you're building the automation. So and a programming mind, you don't have to be a hardcore developer to have a programming mindset, but of course it does help. So the because as the automations become bigger and richer, it's less about the automation mirroring exactly what a human does, and it's more about kind of structuring the solution around an object-oriented or other types of programming mindset, so that it's easier to maintain. So again, general trend in the market, programming mindset, in addition to, of course, what Melanie said a moment ago. Dillan, I'm sorry, I don't want to take all the time, so over to you.
No, I totally agree with all of that, and I'll just add a couple of points, which is, generally I think that it's still a pretty niche skill. We're seeing it explode a lot, but we find probably it's still candidate driven. We're often looking a lot for different resources and stuff like that, and definitely that trend of trying to look for more and more senior resources is definitely there. If you go back a few years, it was about taking, as Steve said, those technically minded people and giving them the skills or willing to invest, right, to get them in what I would call sort of core RPA. So, scaling back to things like your normal studio and robots and stuff like that. Whereas now the diversity of the ecosystem is a lot broader. Now we're expecting people to have those core skills, done and dusted, and actually the ones that are really showing themselves in the market are the ones that are exploring those other emerging technologies and able to support those kind of places as well. As consultancies, as we're all from, we're looking for the best so that we can give the best to our clients. And it's hard, I think, generally we feel there's not enough of you out there. We need more. We need more seniors, and we need it quickly.
Give me some hope also. What is about the new entries? Any internship for students? So how the new entry, the beginner space look like? Thank you, Melanie.
Yes, definitely. So, I mean, we've been growing a lot the past few years, and we're super lucky. I mean, what you also saw in the slides, the people are happy in the RPA space. They tend to stay. So we have a quite mature team now that know exactly what they're doing. A very high performing team, and so we're definitely still in the place where we can hire, inexperienced people just coming fresh from university or offering internships, just because we have this very stable team. And so we're more than happy to continue growing our team with junior talents as well. And it's a great chance for our people that have been with us for some years, because we really want to develop them into future leaders. So it's a great opportunity for them as well.
We see the same, because we've grown our team 4x over the past year and a half to 2 years. So it's a very substantial growth. A lot of people coming into the industry. But if you are trying to come in, what we're looking for are people who want to make a career in RPA. So you have to show that you really are engaged. And one of the things that we've been doing, so we just recently sponsored a hackathon with RPAtools.com, RPAtools.com, where we had university students building automations, and then we had over 1,000 people participate, and I was one of the judges, and we had like 27 use cases at the end that we were looking through, and it was amazing to see all these different ideas that the students had come up with, that they then had built into most of them had built out. Some of them didn't quite get all built out, but at least they were explaining the ideas. We ended up hiring some of them as well. But if you're in school and this is an area that you need to get involved in, there's so many different communities that you can get involved in. And then I think, as we were talking about how people are finding jobs, it's a lot through the network, and the community is a great way. Not only is it a great place to get mentorship, quick answers to questions and things like that if you're in the industry, but it's also a great way to enter the industry and sort of declare your commitment.
Perfect. Dillan, which are some of the program languages required or technologies? What do you expect, and what do you see in the people that you meet?
So I always think this is quite an interesting one, because I think that, the first thing to be said is you can make a career very, very well in RPA, especially around something like UiPath, without having that knowledge. I always say when I'm teaching my trainees, I wasn't a coder before we started doing this. A lot of it was new knowledge to me. I was technically minded, to Steve's point. I think that is much more of a bigger driver, right? It's the right type of person with the right kind of mindset. But that said, I think, certainly .NET, VBA are still the ones that are sort of championing in terms of the language. I know for UiPath specifically, they've moved over into using C# as well. So that's become, quite a lot more useful. What we tend to see is that those people who have those kind of backgrounds in other sort of coding practices and stuff like that, there are parts then of their work in RPA that they're able to really spearhead and go forward with, and maybe foster the others, other developers, in terms of bringing them up to speed with things like maybe SQL databases or anything like that. So, I would never say that anything like that is a prerequisite. I think it all builds a picture of those kind of candidates, and to a certain extent as well, depends on who is doing the recruiting. In consultancies, we often want quite a broad range of different skills, and try and mix those skills amongst the team. Whereas if you're actually a client, you're likely going to want to be looking at some slightly more specific types of coding practices that they may want. If you have large SQL databases that always need a lot of maintenance and things like that, you're likely to put those sorts of things at the top of your list. So, I'd always say the big two, if you like, would be .NET and VBA. But that's not to say that they're all very helpful. Python, for instance, we're moving more and more towards more AI, more machine learning. Python is really integral to that kind of side of things as well. So I think it's a bit of a mix, but what I would definitely say is, it's by no means a cut and dry. You have to have X, Y, Z in order to be a good RPA developer.
Cool. Steve, I'm curious. I remember a few years ago, when I was talking with RPA developers, it was quite a lot about, okay, but it's difficult to really listen or to really get the communication from the business user, from the expert. So the struggles of the RPA developers were around soft skills more than just the technical side. What do you see as critical soft skills that make or break a contract with an RPA developer?
Well, before I answer that, I will say it's going to get even worse if you don't have soft skills, because we're seeing a very strong shift of it's for the people who are very successful can perform more like consultants than like developers, because you have to when you're trying to understand what the business is trying to do, you have to be able to kind of engage with them and ask the right questions, and then listen, and then structure what you heard to play back to them in order to kind of get their consent. And one of the challenges that you have is, like, if I'm doing a job on a regular basis, I may forget that every other Tuesday that I do something else that needs to be incorporated into the automation. So But I would say that you just say the interviews, open-ended questioning around the soft skills, being able to listen, being able to structure what you heard and play it back in a way that people can understand what you've said. I think the saving grace will be to make it a little easier, of course, around this interviewing and engagement with people is kind of the process and the task mining tools really seem like they're starting to come and be real. I mean, to my opinion, very few of them have actually delivered on their promise, but it feels like they're finally getting to the point where they can do a bit more than that, which I think will be very helpful to the developers, because then they can see the actual data from these systems, present that to their business stakeholders and say, this is what we see, what's really happening here, to kind of frame that discussion a bit more.
So they will no longer need the soft skills once.
No, they still need the soft skills. I didn't say that.
Yeah, joking.
But they'll have a few like tools in their tool bag to help them if they get stuck.
We actually have like a related question in the chat now. It's from Stephen. We're saying like, but isn't that where the business analyst comes in? Like referring to what you said, Steve.
Yes and no. I mean, you can't. It's not the wall. There aren't like strong walls between all these roles. So. And the business analyst should do a lot of what I talked about, but the developer still needs to engage into the discussion, because if I'm the developer, I want to hear the business people talk about it too. I don't want to just rely on what the BA heard, because maybe they missed something, right? And because at the end of the day, if we build the automation and requirements come up late, well, whose fault is that, right? Is it the developer? Is it the BA? Everyone's going to be mad at everybody else. So like, let's go for a low drama, experience for everybody, and kind of get involved, work with the folks, and participate in the process.
Thank you.
Not to push for some answers, more like two honest answers, but in reality, as per what you see, do people really invest also in having enough business analysts, or they try to get the same tasks to be done by the RPA developers? And you should not talk about your companies, but what you see in others.
I might just jump in on this one as well, because I think it relates back to something we saw in the slides around those RPA teams, right? And why do they jump from a few people to tons of people very quickly? And for me, I think it's because in the beginning, you quite often see very broad roles. And it's interesting because often you're maybe dealing with junior people. So, expecting them to work in a very broad sense like that is quite challenging sometimes. But you have to remember that at the first adoption, these companies are, taking their first few steps. Maybe they're not making a huge investment and they're testing out the water. And often we'll see that developer, I think Steve, hit the nail on the head, consultant. We often, use that terminology to describe someone who is not just an RPA developer, but also has those business analyst type attributes as well. And I think that as companies then scale up their operations, they see those benefits and they really begin to invest more in the program, that's when those sort of walls start to come up a little bit more in terms of the division of labor, if you like, in terms of those different RPA positions, not just BAs, but PMs, infrastructure experts, and really drawing that all out. And, depending when you might join a company on their journey, you'll probably end up fitting into sort of one of those loose two categories, which is they're starting out and they're quite broad about what you're being asked to do, or they're more mature along their journey and their roles are probably better defined. And to be honest, different individuals will thrive in one or the other or both. I wouldn't say necessarily that everyone is longing for the structure of a predefined role or the other way around. I think, ultimately we all have our tendencies towards those different aspects. So it's really interesting to see that play out in the statistics as well, I think.
If I actually, to answer your question directly, yes, I think that companies are underinvesting in the BAs, expecting the developers to do more of the work. I think that hurts them, and I think that the best teams have the full round of teams, as Dillan and Melanie were saying. But But I do think as a developer, like you're going to have to do a lot more of this than you might otherwise have thought.
Okay.
Yeah, we also see that a lot, that as soon as the developer is in a client project, the client's going to reach out to them directly, right? And they're going to ask for changes. They're going to ask like, oh, I forgot to mention that to your colleague, but I would like to do this and that. And we just need people to be assertive in their communication and be open about it and manage expectations and not be afraid of the customer and just say like, look, we're going to have a look at this. We can do anything, but we need to talk about it first. So you really need the developer to be an open communicator.
Perfect. Taking them, so now we went through the recruiting phase, what's happening, it may be internal transfer. So what's next for them, like in terms of training and enablement? Do you take them to specializing them in different technologies? I can talk only about in UiPath platform. We have so many products right now. So do you expect people to get specialized in each? And then on top of that, considering the technology integrations and all that, so it's a lot. Or you try to get people to be more generalist, to know a bit of everything, and then depending on the project, they will just practice the skill. So how do you play on this one?
I'll jump in and take this one first, if that's all right, guys. So, you know, I think with RPA and, you know, we have to begin to bring in the term intelligent automation, I think here as well, to describe that larger ecosystem. For me, there is still the idea of the core, right? So you know, in UiPath terms, that's Studio, maybe Studio X, your unattended robots, your attended robots. I believe that, you know, really to do well as a developer and as someone in this industry, you need to lock down that as a priority, first of all. You start going beyond that, and that's where we get really broad, and broad really is the word, I think, here, because I think we forget sometimes that RPA as a technology is almost unrivaled in the expectation we put on it. In theory, interacting with any system, any piece of data, you know, really, has there ever been a set of software that has said that they can do that? And that puts an incredible amount of sort of broad scope on what we're asking it to do and what we're asking the developers to do. And then UiPath, just to make it even more complicated, have, I think, expanded that out again in terms of the different tools and the emerging products that they've brought on the table. I don't think anyone can be an expert in every single one of them, really. I think, you know, especially at the moment, there's so much out there that once you've got the core, you know, RPA down, I think you do need to start specializing. That doesn't mean that you are going to only do document understanding or machine learning or something like that, but you have to be able to go through that journey where you learn and you gain the experience so that you can be good at that particular element of the ecosystem. In 10 years' time, I'd like to think we'll have tons of really great senior developers that have had the experience in all of those places. But, you know, the idea that you might take someone on and just put them through training in each one of these products and just expect them to go out and you know, do good for your company, I don't think we can ask that of people, to be honest. I think we have to go down the specialized routes as we begin to tackle these emerging products.
Any other perspectives, Melanie, Steve, or it's quite similar in your case?
I think Dillan summed it up well. You need the core, and then you got to pick a couple to go deep, and that's why we have big teams, so we can help each other when if you need something that you haven't gone deep in. But it's all about bringing the right tools to the job to create the most amount of value with the best use case, and that increasingly requires multiple platforms. So you at least have to be able to, you have to be comfortable with it. And then I think you need to do more than just RPA.
Well, in order to do that, which are the learning resources you recommend? And you see them in high usage, you see them doing, being successful, so not necessarily, because there is a lot of content now. So I think some time ago, there was not much content, and we were all relying only maybe on the UiPath Academy in the case of UiPath. But now we see so much content, so diverse, YouTube, many other resources. So what do you recommend and you see being effective?
I mean, I would say always at the forefront, and I know I'm talking fairly specifically about UiPath here, although the other vendors do it, the community. You know, I see training is kind of like the theoretical knowledge, but you're missing something around experience and real life sort of implementation knowledge and things like that. And you can get that in a number of places. You know, as a consultancy, we're very lucky that, as Steve said, you know, we build broad teams, they're able to upskill each other. But if you don't have that kind of support network, the community is amazing. It really, really is. I think it will continue to be one of the star pieces in the UiPath platform. Its engagement is incredible. And, you know, as a developer, certainly when I was starting out, it was probably my main source for information that went beyond the stuff on the academy. And I think you can extrapolate that out as well to include things like the YouTube channels and stuff like that. I know many of the MVPs this year, you know, are very prevalent with their own YouTube channels and things like that. And it's about sharing that knowledge. And again, I go back to the word broad. It is so broad. You could have a developer that's been doing this for 6 years, something like that, and they will not have done RPA on a certain technology or a certain system. So leveraging the community to get that kind of knowledge, I think is absolutely essential. And if you're a developer and you're not doing that, you're making life difficult for yourself.
Definitely. Yeah, the same here. So we also encourage our developers to participate in the communities. But we also have our own communities. So we put a very strong focus on knowledge exchange within the company. So we have our Thunder Talks, Lightning Talks, where people can exchange. It's a nice platform also for more junior colleagues if they got into a new technology to share their knowledge and to present themselves as experts. Yeah, the internal knowledge sharing is also super important for us. And we've now also got our own academy, so really a training department that does internal trainings for us, but also external trainings for our clients. And of course, that's also great go-to source for us.
Cool. And Steve, you mentioned mentorship, you mentioned hackathons. Anything else that you recommend to our audience?
Well, you know, it's hard to add to what Meredith and Dillan just laid out there, because I thought they really covered the space very, very well. So, you know, when the hackathon is a very proactive involvement in the community as opposed to kind of just leveraging the community. So these assets, we call them assets, these knowledge sources are what you make of them. And you know, you give what you get. It's also a wonderful way, if you get engaged with people, to kind of see if you kind of like that kind of person, because then you can go see the kinds of companies that these people work for. If you're looking for a job, you want to have sort of a cultural fit. I know we have 7 to 10 sort of MVPs on our staff, so we encourage them and everyone else to broadly participate. And you talked about vendor training. I want to just go back. So let's not forget, vendor training is still very good. So, you know, we like that. And a lot of people work on different ways to present vendor training. So that's kind of the basics. We didn't talk about certification. We're a big believer in taking the tests and passing the vendor certification tests as well, as proof points that you've mastered certain topics. So though certification alone is not the final thing, we do a lot of additional work with people who are certified to kind of make sure that they're, you know, Wonderbot's ready when we train them with our academy. But there is, I mean, I've been in this industry for 8 years now, 9 years. None of this stuff existed back then, and so now it's easy to get into RPA because there's so many resources around.
Cool. When it comes to recruiting your channels, so in your case, or for in the case of the customers you work for, do you see them looking for external talent, or they still try to identify internally, to trying to identify internally and to upskill and to specialize them into RPA? So what's in this area?
I think it depends on where they are in their path, in their journey around RPA. And that a lot of times, you had that chart you put up with small teams, mid-sized teams, and then very large teams. Okay, so which I think probably reflects different profiles of companies. So the 1 to 5 would be a very early adopter, most likely, probably pulled in, because if you're a manager or a leader at that company, you may not want to start hiring external people until you're sure that this is something, despite everything that's in all the press, you might not want to do it until you know that it works for you. So you'll grab a couple of people, you'll let them go through the training, and they'll experiment, or maybe they'll have a firm like ours or somebody else is kind of working alongside them to kind of make sure that they're developing the right habits. But then as you get a little bigger, and you see the value, the need for speed, because you can create so much value so quickly with this. We don't want to have somebody figuring it out as they go along. We want to have people that have been there before. And that almost always requires either external talent or a consultancy like us or one of the other ones here to kind of come in and to kind of help you see that all of this value is actually attainable. And that when you build it correctly, you can harvest that value very fast. So again, and then of course the largest pool are probably your 50 plus are probably all external, consultancies. Very few individual clients build a team. We've seen that size at some of the largest Fortune 500, but for the most part, those are probably external service providers.
Perfect. Melanie, how are things in your organization and in the organization that you see? Where do you get the source of talent?
Yeah, I mean, so our organization consists purely of RPA developers, so we're not going to move anybody, so we're definitely hiring. But I think what's important there is that maybe if it's a less mature client, they can move somebody internally to do the simple automation, simple RPA. But the more intelligent it gets and the more closer it gets to hyper automation, it makes sense to get external people who actually have the experience and can leverage these big complex projects.
Cool. Because I see quite many questions, I will try to close quite soon with one last request from each of you. And then we switch to the open Q&A that we have. So I want to hear from each of you to share a trend, depending on how you want to call it, a trend, a bet, a belief, something that you see in the automation market this year, and a recommendation for the ones that hear us right now when it comes to that. So Dillan, do you want to share?
I knew you were going to finish that. So in terms of a sort of prediction, I guess, I kind of two sides to it. I think for enterprises, I think we're going to see system developers really come quite a long way this year. I think there was a lot of work, really good work done on it last year, and we're certainly seeing clients adopt that more and more. But for individual developers, sort of current RPA developers, I think that actually the concept of core RPA is going to expand out a little bit as well. Stuff like document understanding has been taken so very quickly into clients' ecosystems that we see it almost inseparable now from sort of what we would consider core RPA. So I think for current RPA developers, you should be looking at some of the emerging products and thinking, actually, this is, I need to know this as much as I need to know anything else. And in terms of sort of advice, if you like, very simple, always be learning. UiPath, love them to bits, but gosh, don't they bring out new products very quickly. So, we need to keep on top of it as developers. There's always more to learn, and the more that you can sort of take in and be ready to start getting the experience. I talked earlier on about there's the theory around the training and then there's the experience. Well, when the jobs come up that need X, Y, Z, you need to be ready with the skill set and ready to implement it. So always be learning.
Cool. Thank you. Melanie, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. Great advice, Dillan. Always be learning, definitely. So about the trend, what we see is really a large trend going away from task automation towards end-to-end process automation. And this has been going on for a while. What we also see is there is a consolidation in the market around platforms rather than tools. And with that in mind, UiPath is really a perfect place to start and expand an automation career. RPA has taken hold of enterprises and still is one of the fastest growing markets in the automation space, but other technologies like closed technologies like BPM, for example, conversational AI and general AI are becoming more and more important very quickly. So having that in mind, UiPath definitely offers the capabilities to grow into that all-around talent, really, in terms of automation. So really, in general, RPA is a great starting place for what we're looking into. But yeah, the same as Dillan said, keep on learning. We're not looking for the one-trick pony here, but we need the broader skills in the future.
Cool, thank you.
I would say the lesson learned is don't go third when you have to give a big bet or vision for the future. So Melanie and Dillan have laid out excellent vision there. I probably just hit a little harder on I think what we'll see in the next year is that the AI, natural language understanding, will become a big part of the use cases, and which is awesome because I think it'll open up a whole new realm of use cases that previously weren't really practical to do. I know these technologies have been around for a while, so I'm not saying they're new technologies. What I'm saying is that they're finally going to hit a tipping point around adoption, and we're going to see them starting to be integrated more into what's going on, including their application in like process and task mining, which again, I think we've had a lot of promise and hasn't always delivered all of the results that we want to have. But I feel like all of these more advanced technologies are coming together and are sorting themselves out enough that they're ready to start delivering the value. And then, of course, companies will adopt them, and the developers will need to know how to use them. It's sort of a basic flow to that.
Perfect. And with that, we still have 15 minutes, but I will let Chris help us with the questions because we have quite many on different channels. So
yes, and we will end it on sharp because I just realized our stream is also on Zurich stream, so we will end the meeting on sharp. I will try to pass some of the questions now. Some of them are already addressed in chat by our MVPs, which I have to help us, of course. But I will start from the first ones first. So first one is about like management approach from Mauricio. He's asking whether is it agile or waterfall approach for RPA, which one is best? So I think maybe, I don't know, maybe Steve could give us an insight on that.
You give me a controversial one to start with. We are not big believers in an end-to-end agile approach for RPA, and it may be because we tend to do bigger end-to-end automations that we need to apply more of a structure. We like to have more of a structure to the code. Now, I do think, if you think about, you've got, design, the requirements around what it's going to do, the design and the build. I think you can do agile within each one of those phases so that we can build out the best vision for it in an agile way. We could build the design before we start building in an agile way, and then we could actually do the coding in an agile way against the design that we laid out. But what and I've seen that with clients, I hate to say it, it's like, so in each interval you can apply. But I remember one of the clients that we talked to, had been working with before we started working with them. He said, "Oh, it doesn't work, and we can't get it to work." And I said, "Well, that's because you're probably letting requirements come in late, and it's messing up the whole design, and you're having to restructure everything." And he goes, "Yes." And I said, "Well, you can't do it that way. You shouldn't do it that way. What you should do is you've got to put in anchor points and then move." But again, that may sound horrible, but these are not 9, 12, 18-month projects. These are quick projects that you can have later phases onto. So that would be our point that I'd recommend. I know Nisar is on our team. He's raising his hand. He's probably going to disagree with me, but that would be my view, at least.
No, Steve, I don't disagree. I mean, I just have a very quick question, by listening to this. And this question is not only to you, it's to entire panel. So question is a little tricky. Now, a product sale in the market to customers, does it purely depend on product's technical capabilities and skill capabilities of the particular product, or it also depends on how big the community this product contains and how active this community is in terms of response, and how well this community is connected so that the developers are comfortable with a particular product? So does it also depend, and does it impact on the sales of the product directly or indirectly? That is my question.
And that's for adoption of a particular vendor, is it, Nisar?
Yeah, I mean, it's a generic question. It's not a particular vendor, but in generic, based on your experience, what do you think? I mean, does it impact when it comes to that?
So, when we're talking to clients at that very early stage, and we will make it count, right? We know from experience that the kind of ecosystem that UiPath exists within, in terms of the community and the support and stuff like that, is really important, and especially for those customers who are starting out, because just as we've alluded to again and again and again, it's at that stage that they're bringing people from around the business who don't have the experience, and they don't have a great support network within the enterprise. So we see the value in that community. We see it very, very strongly. Now, the great thing is a lot of the other more traditional ways of understanding what vendor to go for, UiPath tends to do pretty well in, so we don't have to labor the point too well. The technology is good, the price points are good, the community, really just adds to it, giving that layer of not only support, but also confidence, that they can achieve what they need to achieve. They see thousands of other individuals who are A, doing it, but B, also able to expand out the vision of the company by leveraging the community. So we certainly find it very important. It might not be top of the list for enterprises, but certainly when we're having the discussions, we make sure that that is kept in mind, because it is important.
Thank you so much, Dillan. That answers really great. I also would like to know Steve's point of view on this. So again, Steve, just to paraphrase the question, does community have an impact on product sale?
Yeah, so Sarg is on our Wonderbots team, and he's challenging me with questions today. So no problem, Sarg. We'll talk about it later. No, I'm just joking.
We also have some questions from the audience, Nisarg, the backlog.
But let me just quickly answer. To me, it's about risk. Everything, it's risk and reward, so that when we're looking at a new technology, or any client or anyone is looking at adopting a new technology, if it doesn't have a community, it doesn't have support, if it's not well established, the risk for that technology is higher. And as a leader in a company, as a leader, you're choosing which platforms to use to solve what areas, you're balancing. There's so many risks involved in building and getting something adopted. You take the risk when you think the reward is worth the risk, so that every product started out at some point, and there wasn't a community that backed it. I know we spend a lot of time looking at the new products that are appearing on the market to understand, are they offering sufficient new functionality? Are they easier to use? Are they better functions, or whatever it is? How does it fit into solving a problem. But definitely, you know, the ones that have the community, that have an installed base, a community of interest, a community of experts that have available labor in the marketplace, reduce the risk and make them more attractive, which doesn't mean that we don't look at new things, because it's like everything starts somewhere. But it's just one of many factors that I think leaders have to address as they're deciding which platforms to use around the automations they're building.
Okay, I
Thank you so much,
will.
Steve.
Nisa, you can use intranet for the rest. I will pick some connected questions we have from the audience, and I will pair 3 of them because I think they are connected in a certain way. They are regarding teams in RPA. So one of them is from Jesse, which is asking whether the COE is a real team, in what way. And the next one is what would be the main goals to start an RPA team? RPA solution architect, RPA BA, RPA developer. And next from Ronak about pair programming. How does it work between developers in the RPA Center of Excellence? Is it effective in terms of delivery? So this is all centered around teams of RPA, Center of Excellence, and the way they work. And I don't know, perhaps Melanie, you would give an angle on that, and then we can move to Dillan.
Yeah, maybe I'm not sure if I got the question correctly, but for the entry positions, I really think it depends on where your interests are, no, on what you want to focus on. If you want to be more technical, if you want to be more on the business side, if you want to start as an RPA developer or more on a business analyst side. So I do think they are slightly different profiles, and really it comes down to what you're excited about.
Yeah, I think they're more like centered around what you would have as an RPA Center of Excellence, an RPA team within enterprise environment. So what would be the composition of that RPA team? What would be the best roles to have in the team in an enterprise environment?
Okay. Yeah, I understand. So yeah, definitely. I think there needs to be, well, it depends on the size of the entire project then in the end. But I do think there needs to be the developer for sure. When it's more mature, as we already said before in the discussion, we would have the business analyst and eventually also project managers to make sure to be able to keep the time frames. And yeah, so that would probably be a good core team. I'm from the recruitment side of things for us internally, so probably Steve would be the better one to give you closer insight on the complete team there.
Yeah, probably, and about pair programming and working together too on projects. And we'll give also Dillan a voice in this. Dillan, do you have experience with teams?
Yeah, I mean, I'd largely echo, I think, what Melanie was saying, and we've touched upon it a few times. You know, if I was to rank the number of individuals in some of the roles that we've done, RPA developer, you know, you probably want the most of those. And then next down, I would say solution architects and BAs, and then after that, PMs. So you might have one PM, a couple of solution architects and BAs, and maybe a sort of relative tranche of developers. And a team like that would function fairly well. You can get very expansive with it. You know, when we talk about COEs and bringing in stuff like AOM models and stuff like that, all of the different positions within an enterprise that might touch that RPA program, you know, whether you give it a role specific to RPA or it's something that just touches upon RPA, you know, it can get pretty expansive, and I think different companies will manage it differently. But in terms of that core team, you definitely need your developers. You will soon come up with some challenges with just developers. That's when you want to make sure you've got your BAs and your solution architects looking after both the company side and the technical side. And before too long, things will start unraveling, and you'll need a PM in there to bring it all together and make sure it's running smoothly.
So I could just throw one on that. So, you know, COE team takes so many different shapes. You know, everyone, it's like a fingerprint, I think. It's that they're all unique across the different enterprises, as Melanie and Dillan have said. I would just say if I was starting fresh somewhere, I would probably look for a solution architect that could also be a developer, and I would hire in or find within my company, if it was an internal, the person who I wanted ultimately to be a key leader in that at the company, so that the early automations were built well, and that we got people excited around the value, because you want them built well from the very beginning. And I think you need a solution architect from the business side that also has strong technical skills to make sure that the actual technical build is done well. Bringing in developers, getting more developers, that's easy to do if you have the core frameworks in place around quality, around the governance, around everything. But it all starts with, you've got some client on the business that has a need, and we're going to go try to develop. So we want to put the best athlete there that has that consultative skills, that can pull out a vision, build a design, and then build it, and then oversee the development. And then once you have those early successes, success begets success. You can always find, and success has lots of friends. So we want to make sure that we're over clubbing early on with leadership, with player coaches, not just like management, but people who actually can do, not like me, who people can actually do the work. That's what I would say on the COE. Okay,
we'll take one more question from what I have here, and it's one more regarding enterprise operation and the structure within enterprise. I think this is pretty relevant. It's from Indra. How do you encourage business user and IT operations to support the RPA team for providing access and data? Some of them think that RPA will be replacing them, and that will make the project fail. So it has to do with cooperation within enterprise departments.
We've had a lot of experience just to the opposite of that, in that the IT teams outside of RPA, don't always appreciate what RPA brings to the table. But I haven't, I think for the most part, the answer is, we'll handle some of these easy things that are irritations for you. We can build these things faster, and let you kind of deal with the bigger, more strategic systems, which has generally been what the non-RPA folks in IT kind of want to do anyway. So it's enriching for them it's just the same way we make mundane work go away from the business people. We can make IT tasks go away from the IT team by using this set of technology that is better able to address those types of needs than traditional tools that are harder to make enhancements to. So but we haven't really come across an IT team that was threatened by well, at least one that we couldn't help see the alternative to.
Thank you for the answers. I think we will close here, since I said that we will close on sharp. Thank you very much for joining us today. We will keep getting, I think, questions in chat and on email, and perhaps we will reach out to you to get some tips and tricks and publish them in the event link afterwards to follow up a bit for the audience. It was very heated up in the chat for this event, and we will have a lot of insights from the chat, and it will be a great recording, I bet, too. So thank you very much, Melanie, Dillan, and Steve, for joining us today and providing this wonderful insight. It was a very great panel. Corina, would you like to say something? Closing remarks?
Yeah, only thank you. It was really exciting as a participant, as a moderator. So looking forward to see the new results this year. So make sure you take the survey and shape the new trends.
Yes, I will give again the survey link now in the chat, but I think most of you are already familiar with it. Guys, please pick up the link and make sure you complete the survey for 2022. So we can all benefit from the insights from this year. The industry and the developers too will benefit from this survey, since it's RPA, not UiPath exclusive, so all RPA industry. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.